Hi, I'm Selena Kyle, and I'm a senior litigator and managing attorney at the Natural Resources Defense Council, which most people just call NRDC. NRDC is a not-for-profit membership organization, and we use impact litigation to protect the environment and public health. I've been with NRDC's in-house litigation team for about 15 years, and in that time, a lot of my team's work has focused on industrial pollution that's particularly threatening to people who live in environmental justice communities. So today's material is very near and dear to my heart. I'll start with a roadmap of what this training will cover. I'm going to start by discussing some basic definitions of environmental justice and tell you a little bit about the origins of the term, just to ground the rest of the presentation. Next, I'll devote most of my time to talking about some of the key laws that have been used to attack and call public attention to environmental justice problems in the United States and in modern legal practice. And I think what you'll see here is that environmental justice lawyering today draws on a patchwork of different constitutional and statute provisions and common law. Next, I'll talk about some of the key laws that have been used to attack and call public attention to environmental justice problems in modern federal practice in the U.S. And I think what you'll find from this part of the presentation is that environmental justice lawyering typically draws on a patchwork of different constitutional and statute provisions and common law doctrines. And there's not a lot of very environmental justice specific statute law in the books yet. After covering some of the key legal provisions, I'll close by sharing some organizing principles and practice tips. Organizing principles that are commonly used and discussed among groups that do environmental justice work, and on the practice tips side, some more lawyer-focused principles that I've found helpful to keep in mind when working with environmental justice groups. All right, let's start by talking a little bit about the definitions and history of environmental justice. So what is environmental justice exactly? It depends on who you ask. So let's start with the definition used by EPA, whose official environmental justice efforts go back to at least 1992, when George H.W. Bush created an Office of Environmental Equity that's now known as the Office of Environmental Justice within EPA. EPA's definition of environmental justice, which you can find on their website, and I've included a link in the materials, is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. EPA elaborates by saying that fair treatment means no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of the negative environmental consequences resulting from industrial, governmental, and commercial operations or policies. EPA also elaborates on meaningful involvement and says that means, first of all, that people have an opportunity to participate in decisions about activities that may affect their environment and/or health. It also means that the public's contribution can influence the regulatory agency's decision, as you'd expect, that community concerns will be considered in the decision-making process, and that decision makers will seek out and facilitate the involvement of those potentially affected. So that's EPA's definition. I think some environmental justice advocates in the private sector would argue that what EPA is talking about in its definition of environmental justice is a different and more limited concept called environmental equity, and that true environmental justice is more ambitious and aims to eliminate harmful pollution and not just redistribute it. So, for example, you can look at ejnet.org. I included a link in the materials. EJNet is a platform that collects academic and organizer writing on environmental justice. And if you look at their website, you'll see that they say environmental equity is not environmental justice. Environmental equity is just the government's response to the demands of the environmental justice movement. And that government agencies like the EPA, according to EJNet, have been co-opting the movement by trying to redefine environmental justice as fair treatment and meaningful involvement. And that although they've failed to meet even that goal, it's also far short of the environmental justice vision. And that vision is that the environmental justice movement isn't seeking to simply redistribute environmental harms, but rather to eliminate or abolish them.